So it says solve a given linear quadratic system graphically. So when we say solve, what we're doing is we're trying to find, and I want you to write this down somewhere. So did you write all these words down? Yes, sir. So what we're really looking for are intersections. And we've done this in the past. And I'll show you how to do this. We'll do this in Desmos, and then I'll show you how to do it on the graphing calculators. Okay? So we're looking for the intersections. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going, does everybody have this written down? I'll leave that up there for a second so you guys can write it down. Okay, how about now? And so while you're writing that down, let me tell you a couple of things. I know that the first equation is a line. It's linear. How do I know that? Because x is raised to the first power and y is raised to the first power. Now this one is quadratic. So the second equation is quadratic because y is raised to the first power and x is raised to the second power. Now remember, whenever we have x or y raised to the second power and the other one is linear or to the first power, that is a parabola. So linear graphs as a straight line and a quadratic graphs as a parabola. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to graph these in Desmos because it's easier to do it in Desmos, and then we're going to find the intersections in Desmos. It's also easier to find the intersections in Desmos. And then at some point in time, we're going to show you how to do this on the TI calculator. The TI calculator is tough because you have to solve for y because you plug it in as y sub 1, y sub 2. So you got to take these equations and algebraically solve them all for y. Just a little bit of work. And right now what I want you to know is that when we solve a system, we just graph everything and then see where they intersect, and those are the x and y values that make things true. Okay? Does that make sense? So the textbook says solve it. I prefer to graph it because then it kind of gives me a guide. So right here I have this equation. The red equation is my linear function. The blue equation or graph is my quadratic. I'm going to zoom in right here. And what I'm looking for is the intersection of these two. So it's that value and that value. And I'm going to take a screenshot of this because I'm going to do a bunch of algebra. And when I'm done with the algebra, these are the x values that should work. Well, let me do a little bit better job of taking that picture. Okay. And so they want us to plot this first. So I want you, here's the thing, and I've been kind of nagging the other class about how they take their notes. It was a funny conversation. They said, I watched your video and I paid attention and I wrote everything down. And I said, no, you didn't write everything down. They were upset because I didn't give them 100% on their notes. I said, well, you didn't write everything down. And then when we started our notes, I wrote a word down. He said, all right, so you're saying I'm supposed to write this down? Yes. So when it comes to so I'm going to explain a little more detailed in what I want written down. when you graph this, notice that this intersects at -4. Notice that this x value is between 1. Notice that this is a -2, right? Notice that this is -2, this is -4. As long as you kind of graph this and you write down the x and y value for the intersections and it's fairly accurate looking, that's all that matters to me. But at some point in time, you have to graph it better, okay? I'll let you know because it'll take forever for me to graph it on the screen. But I want you to sketch it, and here's what I want you guys to think about. What's going to help you get your homework done? So if you're in the moment while I'm teaching you, ask questions about things you don't understand. And when I answer those questions, you might not remember my answers. So it's not a bad idea for you to write down the question, or at the very least, write down my response. If you need extra time, say, hold on, Mr. Adams, let me write that down. Okay. Because 2 weeks from now, when you take the test, you might not remember what I said. But if you have your notes, you could study it, you could memorize it, you could read it, you could look at it. And remember, I let you use your notes on your test. So if you could use your notes on your test, and having it written down in your notes, that's helpful. But generally, as your math teacher, when I teach things, I write down the things that I think are going to help you on your test. And so if I write it down, that means it's important enough for you to write it down. I say a lot of words. I don't write every word down. So if I write something down, it's important. You should write it down. Okay? So anyways, does everybody have this graph sketched? Okay. So then to solve this, I'm going to have to set both of these equations equal to y. So the first step, if I were to write these steps out, and I'm going to write this over to the side. Steps to solve systems. Now, a system of equations is just that. We're looking for more than one equation, and we want to find what x value and y value is true for both equations. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to graph all the equations. The next thing we're going to do is make both equations look like y equals some stuff. Okay? And then 3, we're going to find the intersection. Now, that word is intersection. I ran out of space. Now, the intersection are the x and y values of the intersection. So remember that this is an x value and this is a y value. In other words, if I plug this number into each of those equations, my y value should equal this. If I plug this x value in, both of them will have the same y value as this. Okay? So let's see what that looks like over here. So I'm going to take the first equation, which is 2x minus y. I've graphed them both. Now I'm going to solve for y. So to solve for y, I'm going to subtract 2x from both sides. And I get negative y is equal to 2x. Now, if when you're solving equations and you don't know why I'm subtracting 2x, or you're not 100%, if that doesn't make sense to you, you need to talk to me because you need to learn how to solve equations. Okay? I will try to answer it in class, but basically you do the inverse of what's being done. If you don't understand, we need to get you caught up because that's all we're going to do the rest of the school year is solve equations. Okay? I have a lot of videos. I could share the videos with you. You got to watch them. But this is stuff that you should have learned in linear or Algebra 1. If you didn't quite master it, that's okay. We need to get you there. Probably because of COVID, right? Like, how much can you learn sitting in your living room on your Chromebook? I'm sure some of you guys might have been watching Netflix in the background while you're doing your homework or something like that. I mean, it's not your fault. But maybe you didn't learn it as well as if your teacher was standing over you, lording over you, saying, pay attention, learn this, learn this, learn this. So anyways, is that a positive y? No. So I need, in order to make that a positive y, I'm going to multiply this by a negative 1. And so whatever I do on one side of the equation, I'm going to do on the other. Negative 1 times negative y is just y. Remember, we're going to distribute this negative 1 through the parentheses. So negative 1 times negative 2x just becomes a positive 2x. Negative 1 times positive 3 is a negative 3. So that's the first equation. Okay. Now the second equation, I'm running out of space, but not really. I'm going to say y plus 6 is equal to 2 times the quantity x plus 1 squared. Now I'm going to subtract 6 from both sides. And I get y is equal to 2 times the quantity x plus 1 squared minus 6. Now I can clean this up a little bit. How do I figure out what x plus 1 squared is? Isn't that the same as 2 times x plus 1 times x plus 1 minus 6? Yeah. So let's figure out what that is. So on a side note, what I'm going to do is I'm going to figure out what this is. Okay. So over here to the side, I'm going to say x plus 1 times the quantity x plus 1. So what's x times x? X squared. What's 1 times x? Positive 1x. X times 1 is just a positive 1x. And what's 1 times 1? Positive 1. So if I combine like terms, what's 1x plus 1x? 2x. So this whole thing becomes x squared plus 2x plus 1. Okay. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to distribute the 2 through the parentheses. Okay. So when I do that, I'm going to write this up here. I get y equals, what's 2 times x squared? 2x squared. What's 2 times positive 2x? Positive 4x. What's 2 times positive 1? Positive 2. Yeah. Why do I have this plus this? This one? Well, it's 1 times 1. Positive 1 times positive 1 is positive 1, right? Remember, this is the row times the column. That's what we're doing. So I'm taking x times x, 1 times x, x times 1. All right. So now we're going to combine like terms. 2 and 6 are both, or negative 6 are both constant. What's 2 minus 6? Well, you're half right. Negative 4, right? So here's the other thing I want to suggest to you guys. Students have a bad habit of just guessing. You need to make sure it's the right answer. So I said, what is, how was that worded? Negative 2 minus, positive 2 minus 6. It's negative 4. Just plug it in the calculator. Just plug it in the calculator. These problems are hard enough as it is. You don't need to be bogged down. Because if you don't get that answer right, in other words, if you would have put a positive 4, it makes the whole thing wrong. Then you got to do the whole problem over. So I always, if you notice when Mr. Adams does the math, a lot of times I double check each step in my head. Sometimes I miss it, but. So now this is that second equation solved for y. So if I did all my math right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug these in here. And I'm going to go to y equals, and I'm going to hit clear. And I'm just going to plug in these equations. So the first one is going to be 2, and you should do this as well. 2x minus 3, that's the first equation. Come down here, hit clear. Let me move my thing over here, and then I'm going to say 2x squared plus 4x minus 4. Now I know when I graph this So I'm going to hit zoom now, and I'm going to hit standard, which is 6. And doesn't that look an awful lot like the graph I did in Desmos? So that's kind of nice, right? And so what I want to do is I want to find these intersections. So I'm going to take a screenshot of this, and then we'll do the math on this and see if we're right. Okay, so I'm going to take a screenshot of this. So on my graphing calculator, it's going to look like this. So on the calculators we use in class, it's going to look like this. So now let's use the graphing calculator to see if the numbers match up. So what we could do is that it's a little trickier on this calculator, but I'm going to hit, I want to calculate it. So if I hit second trace, see how it says intersect? So go down to option 5. Let me know if I'm going too fast. You don't have a calculator in your hand, young lady. Let's go. Plug this in. You want to practice it with me because you don't want to be doing this for the first time when you do your homework. You definitely don't want to be doing this for the first time when you're doing the test because you're not going to be able to use Desmos on the test. You're not going to be able to use Desmos on your SAT. You really need to learn how to use these fancy schmancy calculators that I give you guys every day. Okay. So then when I hit intersect, if I hit enter, you just kind of get it as close to the intersection as you can. Hit enter, hit enter. So the first one wants you to move it close to the intersection for the first line. Then the second one asks you to move it for the second curve. And then it wants you to move it to kind of guess. I think maybe I could go over here. But that's as close as I'm going to get it. I hit enter. Look at that. That's the exact same thing as this right here, isn't it? I mean, it's rounded, but aren't those the same answers? Yeah. So that's correct. So I'm going to pencil that in here. Let me zoom out a little bit. We'll do 50. So when I do this on the graphing calculator, I see that this is going to be 0.366, comma, and then minus 2.268. I ran out of space there. Let me zoom in a little bit. I didn't want to do that. I wrote too big. Don't put your stuff away. We're going to finish this one, and then we'll call it a day. Yeah. Because I want you to see, I want you to practice it on the calculator, but I want you to see that they're the same value. So this is 0.366, comma, negative 2, comma, 268. And then what do you think this one will be? Yeah, the exact same value. So I'm going to plug this in. Oh, I guess the bell rang. All right, go. So if we finish that, that's how we know that it's equal, okay? Have a good day.